All right, here for another Misfit Playbook interview with David Cameron. And I'm Laura D'Ambrosio, and again, we're going to be talking about um, plays that we can add to the Misfit Playbook about how to live as a misfit or how to actually embody some of the principles of being a misfit. So welcome. Appreciate your time, David.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Yes, thanks. Me too.
So you've had a chance to look through and read the Misfit Playbook and all the principles that we have on the Misfit Playbook. So
Yep.
when you think of all those principles, what of the principles really, I mean, all of them are wonderful, but are there one or two principles that really stood out for you?
Yeah, there were. I went through and did your homework,
Thank you.
and you're very welcome. There were three, I think, and you're correct. They, not only are they all fantastic, but they all are obviously they all hooked together. They're all intertwined. But three of them stuck out. One of them, sit in the chair, which to me, the way I phrase that in my own life is this sort of the Stephen Pressfield way, is do the work. The second is collaborate. And that's probably the one that stands out most for me. I find with my kids and over the years of my own life that there's a lot of competitiveness and not a lot of collaboration. And if one goes back and looks at sort of the root of that word, competition, the Latin root competare means strive together. And if people took it that way, if people competed with each other in a manner in which they strove for the betterment of each other toward a common goal, rather than the way it seems to have evolved to now, in that it's who wins, right? I'm going to win at any cost. So that collaborative nature between people, I think, is vital. The third one is be vulnerable, and that's one that I've certainly had a lot of trouble with, I think, over the years, is being able to let go of trying to guess what it is others expect from me and just be myself and be willing to say that's good enough, right? So, but if I had to choose one, I'll choose the collaborate.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And they're all, you're right, they're all wonderful, wonderful principles. And I'm sure you have stories that you could tell on every single one. But let's dig into collaborate then. And
Sure.
so the idea here is that if someone was able to, let's say if we're going to add your plays to the book, it's like a playbook for, the sport of being a misfit. And someone could kind of flip to the chapter of collaborate, and you're going to give them some step-by-step instructions on what they could do to actually implement that principle in their lives. So from your perspective, then, what steps would people go through to deepen in that principle, or the principle of collaboration?
The way I'm going to step back just one little tiny bit, and the way that I look at it, or the way I've applied it, I suppose, is I have a business, I have a family, and it's a manner in which I look at how can I be of service, or how can what I enjoy doing or the person I am work for me and for them. And there's a quote, I think it was Steve Farber that said it, which is, do what you love in the service of those that love what you do. So I try, I guess, to work with that in mind when I'm working with others. And then looking, you asked in my homework, what do you look for, in other people? And that's become a key part of it too, where I'm looking to work collaboratively either with the people I'm working, if you want to say, for, or people who are working with me on certain projects. And the way I look at it, I think currently right now, what I've come to believe or come to focus on is that me anyways, I don't want to speak for others, we live in a time, I live in a time, and I live in a place where it's almost impossibly lucky that I'm here, right? That I have the benefits that I have, that I can sit in this room. I don't live on the East Coast, luckily, so I didn't have to insulate myself from winter, but nonetheless, I'm on. I still have comfort. I can get up and get a cup of coffee and turn on water, and there's heat in here and all those nice things, and we can talk to each other in this manner. I think it's important then to recognize, for me, how lucky I am for that to be around right now, to be born in this, and the obligation I have then to do something with that opportunity. I find sometimes that word obligation, I get a little torn with it philosophically. It's a big word, and I wouldn't want to suggest that everyone needs to do anything with it. It's kind of the enigma, I guess, or the conundrum of that we live. We're fortunate enough to live here, and it's a great gift that we're able to. The secondary great gift of that is that people can choose not to do anything with it if they don't want to, and a lot of people don't. But when I'm looking to work with others or collaborate, then I want to make sure that I'm trying to find people who mirror that, I guess, who see that same, that feel the same, that recognize that, geez, how did I get lucky that this happened, and I'm going to take advantage of all of the gifts, if you want to call them, or all the luck that I've got here, and do something with that.
So if I was going to tease out sort of a step from that, what I'm hearing in what you're saying is that one of the things someone might do is to identify those people or find those people who feel the way you do about life.
Yeah. So the step, in terms of the steps that you had brought up, first I was going to have one. That's sort of all I could come up with, one step. And then I kind of broke it down, as you said, or teased it out into a number of other steps. Now these are steps that were key to me over time, and they're big. They're bigger steps, I suppose, rather than sort of set your alarm for a certain time of day or something like that.
Giant leaps.
Yeah, it's more philosophical, I guess, in view. And the most important one to me, I was going to call what you said. What do you want to call these steps? And for me, it was wake up. And that's what I would title it. Wake up. And the reason I would title it that is because that's essentially what happened to me. That's there was an awakening, and I think I spent a number of years, working in big corporations and being what I affectionately refer to as, for the corporation, they would affectionately refer to me perhaps as this, as the useful idiot. The person who is following along and doing what I'm supposed to do and smiling and, everything's fine. But everything wasn't fine. And, there came a point where I woke up and said, I don't think this is necessarily the best thing to do. And currently, a step that I take that works for me is meditation. There's a tremendous amount of talk around meditation these days, and this idea of being present. I'm all for that. I'm all for being present, but one can't live entirely in the present. You have to, there's some fun to be had remembering things that have happened in the past, and we need to plan for what's coming in the future. But waking up involves in meditation, paying attention. For what that's resulted for me is an ability to watch myself. So an example of that, watch the thoughts, right? An example of that would be you're driving down the road, somebody cuts you off, and you get angry at that driver, and you think about all the things you could have done or said, and you carry that with you for 3 hours or all day. If you're paying attention and you notice these thoughts, then you can give yourself permission to be pissed off for a couple minutes, and then maybe let it go, right? And move on, understanding that it's not of any real benefit to continue feeling that way. So paying attention to yourself. So step one, meditate, or be present, if you will. Step two, watch yourself, your thoughts, pay attention to that. Step three is, for me, and I do look for this a lot in the others, because a lot of this is something you can see in other people pretty quickly, is don't take yourself too seriously. And a quote that I always remember, and I can't remember who said it. I think it was Oscar Wilde. Was life is much too important to take seriously, and I think there's some truth in that. It's important to take what we do seriously, but maybe not so much ourselves, and to have a sense of humor and recognize, the reality of us, rather than allowing, again, being awake, watching our thoughts, so that it's very easy to fall back into those, narcissistic views of I'm great, or on the flip side, I'm not so great. So those are three. And
So,
anything you want to talk about there? Or?
yeah, I'm curious how you relate the three of those to collaboration. I think they're all very, very important, and I can see how they would link. But how do you actually draw the line then between if you're going to meditate and be present, pay attention, to yourself, and not taking yourself seriously? How does that lead to better collaboration?
Well, leads to my step 4.
Perfect.
And I don't know if they all join together, right? These are the things I've done, and so when I went through your stuff, went through your steps here, I determined that, well, I'll talk about me for a change, and let you know sort of how I've gone through this. And in the 4th step, and this does apply to the collaboration, has been then using the first 3 steps, is then take part in things. So a good example is what we're doing right now. The Misfit community that you, Nelson, have certainly been instrumental in keeping together, hooking together, as well as Misfit Inc. That's a great example. So finding things that, if you're not taking yourself too seriously, if you're paying attention to your thoughts, if you're awake and you're being vulnerable, as I mentioned as well as part of that, you're going to find places where you fit or where you feel comfortable. And you may be uncomfortable going out initially, but you need to push yourself a little bit and get out there and do that. And that can come, maybe this should have been step 5. Step 5 that I have, which maybe 4 and 5 switch around, is the idea of setting up rituals and habits around that. So rather than this idea of willpower, rather an idea of developing habits and developing rituals. There, in my way of thinking, is that intrinsic or unbreakable link between mind and body, which of course stands to reason since your mind is a part of your body. The thing that made me laugh once that I thought about was, I have not been one who has been able to avoid certain vices over the course of my life. Things that I enjoy doing or love to hate myself for doing them. And there's a measure of addiction to these things. And, it occurred to me, well, why couldn't I then create the same addiction or the same habit or rituals around things that are good for me? Why wouldn't I like those just as much, right? So hooking all those 5 things, I guess, together, the rituals, the habits, and the first 3 steps, and then allowing to become part of, hopefully, a group, a collaboration with like-minded people, where the sum of the parts is great, is greater. The total is greater than the sum of the parts.
It sounds like what you're saying is you have to know yourself and be aware of yourself. That kind of leads you then into the ability to more deeply collaborate with others.
Yeah. Now, that the whole idea of can you ever know yourself, I don't know. But I think you can pay attention. Mm-hmm. Right? I think you can, as I said in terms of the title of this, I think you can wake up. You can wake up. A lot of us, again, I have to watch the language there. I have spent a lot of time not very awake. You just go moment to moment and sensation to sensation and living through emotions of anger or emotions of happiness and however they come about, right? And moving along with those. And if you can wake up to that, so that is a manner of speaking of being present, certainly. But getting to know yourself, developing rituals around that, keeping a sense of humor, being grateful for things, right? Making note of these things, habits around this. There's a million ways to do it. And that's what I didn't want to get too specific in and suggest that there's any one way that works. But some of these bigger principles, I think, or bigger ideas, in particular for me, have proven most beneficial in terms of figuring out what it is I want to do, how I want to do it, how I want to live, how I want to consume, collaborate, and
So
any
what's
other buzzwords you want to throw in there.
what would be a story from your life that you could share that kind of maybe illustrates some of the things that you're talking about?
You want which one? A story on the good side or a story on the bad side?
Or both.
So the first, I'll give you. I don't know if do I have time here? Yeah, I guess I have
absolutely.
time. So the first story of that I have was the idea of thinking that not everything is the way it seems. Okay, so and I'll try to tell this story very quickly. When I was young, when I was about 16 years old, I had a job at a funeral home. And the good job, not for everybody perhaps. So I went in there to work, and the funeral director, Mark, came up to me. I'd been there a couple of days, I guess, and my job was to be there for viewings. Get there before, help set up, be there for viewings. And it was probably my second or third day, and he came up and said, all right, I want you to get the coffee set up, take these flowers, put them on either side of the coffin, and take this corsage and place it, put it on the person who's being viewed tonight, the deceased. So, okay. So I went up there and did those things, and then I'd never put a corsage on before. I didn't own a suit. I was, living in a Northern Ontario mining town at the time. So I'm fumbling away, and I hear these footsteps behind me, and Mark is about 6'5", and I'm 5'5", and so I can hear him coming up behind me, and I stop doing what I'm doing, and I hear him say, "What the expletive are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm trying to put a corsage on." And I think I mumbled that out. So he kind of nudges me out of the way, and he takes the corsage from my hand, and he picks up the pin, and he pulls his arm back like this, and I'm, you know what you're thinking, right? And then he throws the pin away, and he puts the corsage on top of the deceased, looks at me and winks and says, "He's not going anywhere," and walks away. And I thought, for me, that was this opening, right? It was like, oh, there's more than one way to look at things, right? Just because I hadn't experienced it. So even at that young age, I noticed that. And I made use of that, I think, pretty well for about 4 years. Then I went, then I was finished for maybe longer than that. But once I got out of university, and then I got hooked into the usual thing, as we've talked about, you and I have talked about, in the financial industry, and I just got stuck there. Really, I got mired, and I woke up from that in the financial crisis of 2008, and I call it the angry wife awakening, because we were actually on the other side of the country at the time in Newfoundland, and I was pushing my son in a carriage, and they don't have any sidewalks in St. John's, and the roads are all wrecked, and the markets were down 700 points, and my wife was saying something that bugged me, and I was having trouble with the stroller, and I told her, you know what, I think you're going to have to go back to work. And she didn't take that very well. So I got her angry, and I was angry, and it just made me stop, because I knew that I wasn't getting good answers from, during this significant period of turmoil that all my clients were going through, that I was going through, and I knew at that moment, that was kind of the big awakening after literally, over a decade of just snoozing, that I had to do something different. So, I had to think, who am I working for? Am I working for this company, or am I working for my clients? And so the collaboration issue then came around in terms of, I said, I'm going to figure out if there's another way to do this, and how do I want to live? I have the house, I have all these things. Is that really it? It just, all of a sudden, it all seemed boring. So I came around to determining what it was I wanted to do. Could it be done? If it could be, I was going to continue doing it to the best of my ability. If I determined it couldn't, I wasn't going to keep taking money for what I was doing. I was going to quit. Turned out you could. So I'm happy to say that. And from there, I was able to get to the point where I am now, where I have a partner and some other people I work with, and a group of individuals all over Canada and all over the United States, actually, who share this. So we're able to work not both competitively and collaboratively, but competitively in the same way that we raise each other's games, right? Not competitively in the I'm going to stomp you to the ground and drive you out of business type of way. So those are sort of, that's a really quick, as I glance at the clock there, quick summary, I guess, of a few decades worth of work. And, you know, we've come to that point now where, you know, I'm Canadian, so I apologize for it, but where I comfortably can, or uncomfortably, again, because I feel apologetic and I'm not supposed to brag, but, you know, I can say that we objectively, very objectively, are running some of the best portfolios in the world, bar none. And we're proud of it, you know, we're proud of it. And it's doing good things, and the work we're doing, the work I'm doing, what drives it is to say, you know, there's a lot of stress behind money issues, and that's why I stayed here. And if I can have some kind of manner, even a small one, to relieve some of that stress from people, then they're going to be doing their best work more effectively than if they're in a panic situation. And I'm a psychology guy, and I know from past studies and work that I've done that, you know, having financial stress affects that part of the brain, the amygdala part of the brain, lizard brain, whatever you want to call it, in the same way as, you know, having somebody point a gun at you. So mortal terror, losing money, unfortunately the same feelings, right? Nobody's at their best when they're going through that.
Great.
So it's important then to work collaboratively, not only with the individuals who help me run this enterprise, but it's also important to look at the world from a point of view that there's an abundance of people, of good people out there to help, right? A lot of industries out there and a lot of jobs are based on the idea of scarcity and fear. There's not enough, right? Hence this issue around the competitive nature of I've got to win at any cost against you. If you turn that around and say there's lots of people, and use Kevin Kelly's view of 1,000 true fans, for instance, where, you know, you only need so many people to make a living, and you look at it from what's a wellness, like a lifestyle view. What's my lifestyle rather than wealth? I need to be wealthy. I need to be rich. I need to have all the toys, right? I just need to have a good life. Well, what does that look like?
Sure, asking those kinds of questions is important.
Yeah, and finding people who view it that way, and saying, and basically not spending any time with those who don't, right? And it's your choice. In the same way that I say earlier that, you know, I look at being born at this time and place in this country as fantastical to a certain extent, right? What are the odds? They're, you know, I don't know, they're crazy. But here I am. So I feel an obligation to do something about that. Not everybody does. Some people are like, you know, whatever. That's okay, you know, and I'll fight for their right to make that, to have that ability to make that choice. But my choice is I don't need to collaborate with you, right? If you're that person. I don't want to end on a negative note. I'm looking for, you know, I'm trying to find the other people, and thankfully there's lots of them, right? There's not a shortage of them, that's for sure.
Well, let's summarize some of the steps that you have laid out. So what we have is, in order to better collaborate, is to meditate and be present, watch yourself, pay attention to your own self. Don't take yourself too seriously. And I think those are the three that you kind of come under the umbrella of, you know, wake up.
Yep.
And then setting up the rituals and habits that are in line with your awareness of yourself, those healthy rituals and habits. And then that leads you to take part in the activities with like-minded people.
Then go join.
Go join in.
Don't do all these things. Don't do all these things in a room by yourself, right? Yeah, go out and and share the wealth. Yeah. And
you said some things towards the end that I actually think it might be incorporated in some of your steps. One is to choose to have a life.
Yes.
And to make the choices about how you're going to live. You know, that question is a great one. How am I to live in a day-to-day basis is one of the questions that you can hold in your mind about as you're making some of these choices and decisions.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think what you've done in the stories is you and I have chatted a little bit, you know, had a chance to talk more deeply, and I think your story is a great one, especially because of the industry you're in. To come out of that, that highly competitive financial industry, and to switch it around and turn it on its head to a collaborative thing is something I'd love to to talk with you more, but we're going to run out of time in this particular interview.
Yeah. Yeah, we want to redefine some of the basic principles and definitions that people have in their heads about how this industry works and what money means, right? And so that's some of the important work we're trying to do.
Great. Okay. So I think we're getting to a place where we can wrap up. And I want to first off thank you very, very much for your time. So
thank you guys for doing it. Thank you very much.
And we have a final question for you.
All right.
The Misfit Playbook team would like to know which Misfit would you like to hear from? Who would you like to hear from next?
Jeez, you put me on the spot on that one.
Yeah. It's kind of like our version of the Ice Bucket Challenge. You know, okay, let's call somebody out, right?
Yeah. Well, you know what? I want to hear from Lou.
From Lou. Awesome.
Lou, yeah.
Danger Lou. All right,
Danger Lou. I did some. We did some collaborative writing together at the end of 2014, and I want to hear from her because I haven't talked to her since.
All right. Well, we'll ping Lou and see if we.
Yeah,
can
you tell her. I said she's got to do it. That's right.
All right. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you again. Appreciate your time. And we'll be putting this interview out for people to listen to, and also be teasing out some of the steps that we can include into the book.
All right. Fantastic.